Hello, I'm Pastor Hilly. Thank you for joining us for this, our season finale of Faith Lutheran Church's Adult Forum series. We're calling this episode Capital Connections. But before we get to our special guest this week, a brief reminder that during this time of social distancing, there is wonderful ministry coming out of the community that we call Faith Lutheran Church in Whitehall, Ohio. Ministry that includes this very podcast. If you would like to support the ministry of faith financially, please find the link labeled Giving in the description below. And now, on to our episode. Joining me today is the university pastor from Capital University, the Reverend Drew Tucker. Drew, how are you, man? Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me. You know, Reverend always feels a little bit out of my league when we use it. It's like I just write Rev in emails. I'm like, that's even that, just the abbreviation. I'm Drew. I'm Pastor Drew. Reverend seems like I should have much longer hair or a much taller pulpit somewhere, and I just don't have either of those things.
Fair point.
Yeah.
How is this social distant life treating you, my friend?
It's so weird. It's been good in a number of ways because it's forced me to do things that I have needed to do or wanted to do for a long time. You know, we have upgraded a lot of our equipment to make digital engagement better in terms of everything from microphones to input software and input hardware. And that's been kind of fun, but that's really just been a distraction from all of the things that I've been missing, right? All of the difficult lack of in-person goodbyes for our graduating seniors, the sad reality of ending sports seasons early for all of our student athletes, of dealing with the fallout for some of our students who didn't just get to go home, but didn't have a home to go home to, right? So there's lots of that ministry, lots of that presence, lots of that relationship formation that is just so different now. And so we're doing things, we are learning new ways of being church and of living out our call. And for me, that's just anxiety inducing. I something I'm pretty public about is I have been diagnosed with depression and a general anxiety disorder. This happened when I was in graduate school. And so usually have that pretty well under control. This whole season, it's been fine most days, but once every 7 to 10 days, I just get real hit for a good bit, just trying to figure out how am I going to make it through? What is today going to be? Are we going to be able to meet the needs that are there? And so that's just the reality, right? That we're all doing the best we can, and we're all facing our own kinds of suffering in the midst of it.
Yeah. No, it's very true, man. It's very true. And you know, you and I are about to crack the book open and look at a lot of that kind of ministry happening at Capital.
Yeah.
Well, I'm assuming that, like the rest of us, over the past 6 weeks, 8 weeks, you've also spent a lot of time at home.
So much time at home. So we've done
new hobbies, home upgrades. Like, what's been happening?
Home upgrades for sure. So we have a new concrete patio, and we had installed by somebody else. But then my wife's father and uncle were here this weekend, and we just built a shed. So I learned everything from how to level a foundation to how to roof in the last weekend, which is, new for me. And so if this whole pastor thing doesn't work out, I'll just start roofing sheds for a living, I guess. It's one of those things that actually it was really cathartic. And also I was working, the third hardest out of all of us because I had no idea what I was doing. Her dad and uncle had done all this stuff before. And so I was exhausted, and I wasn't the one that was sitting on the peak, like hammering in the roof cap. And, Bud is in his late 50s or early 60s. And so, it's just that reality of I would have done it, but he's like, oh no, I'll do it. You just watch me and figure it out. Really? Okay, sure. So that's new. We've installed some new shower heads in our showers. Got some rainfall shower action going on now, so it's a very luxurious, very luxurious in our normal Berwick home, right? So yeah, it's been some of that kind of stuff. What I've missed out on though. I used to be an avid hour of cardio at the gym every single day, and since the gym has not been open, I have not been working out, and that has not been great. But we're hoping, the gym's opened back up as of yesterday. And so I'm hoping to get back into a habit come tomorrow, because today I'm Zoom recording something between noon and 9 o'clock tonight. So I'm just on the computer all day long. So
thinking about your shed, I find this reality in my own life where you spend so much time like reading or sermonizing or planning or projecting that like whenever I made a fence in my backyard, and I made a 2.5 foot by 12 foot raised bed planter.
Yeah.
And to actually create a thing and like it is done and there it is, it happens so infrequently in my life.
Right. The evidence of progress when you're not in the soft skills area, when you're like, no, I just need to turn this plot of land into a different kind of thing. Or gosh, power washing. I love power washing because it is very obvious. Like, this once was that dirty, moldy, grimy color, and now it is whatever, concrete or wood or siding or whatever it is. It's now the original color. And it's just so nice to have that kind of, here's the evidence of the progress I've made. I can tell how many square feet I've done. Yeah, it's just not the same thing as providing pastoral care, which is my calling, which is where I truly feel I come alive.
Yeah.
But it's also a lot harder to grasp there's no square footage to the progress you make in grief, right? There is grief progress, but there's no square footage to look back and say, clearly we've carved out this 10 by 20 square. It's going to be weeks, months, or years before you can really point to the thing and say, there's the progress. It's the different response. It's the varied reaction. It's the getting to a holiday and responding differently than they would have. So that's the kind of where you're right. Sometimes I just would rather, we're also laying 10 or 5 tons of gravel in our instead of mulch. So we're doing it for landscaping. And that's the other thing where I'm like, just, at some point, just let me move a few thousand pounds of rock. That feels, it was there. It's now here. I feel better about life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, you and I once sat down at the crew club, and one of the things I just found really interesting was that you and I have swam in like very similar streams, albeit at really different times in our lives.
Right.
Like you put in time at Duke, you taught at Lenore Rhine, you spent all the time at Southern. I grew up in North Carolina Synod. I know all those guys. Like, I graduated high school 40 miles north of Duke University, where my brother currently works.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And what I find really fascinating is that between me at Faith and you at Capital, we're both within 2 miles of Trinity. Neither one of us are Trinity grads.
No.
But I think it's a really positive reality, because it shows like the fluidity of the ELCA in its best reality.
I do think that, exactly. There was a real, I'm actually in my office at Trinity right now. So these bookshelves that you see behind me, these are Trinity bookshelves. I was never envisioning coming back to Ohio, never envisioning working at Trinity. And then when this call came open, there was a whole story around my sister's cancer diagnosis and me thinking I was going to be moving further south or further southwest rather than coming back to the Midwest. Obviously, God had different plans. So the idea of coming to Trinity was really strange, because when I did my first seminary visit, I was a middle schooler, and my pastor, Walt Jordan, God bless him, he's like, we're going to take you to a seminary. I'm like 13. This doesn't seem like necessary right now, but whatever, we'll go. That's fine. And so we were in the lecture hall that is downstairs, and currently a victim of the water damage that you are referencing. And so, it's not been in use for a good while. But I remember just feeling so entirely out of place, not because of Trinity, not because of the faculty or the staff or anything like that, but because I was a 13-year-old in a graduate school looking at people who were not just, 21, 22, 23 right out of college, but 40, 50, 60, second, third career kind of people. And I'm trying to imagine them as my peers. No way, right? That was just not going to be a thing. So Trinity had this really strange feel in my call as a place where I reacted against what God was calling me to, but it was because it just wasn't the right time. It wasn't the wrong place. It just was the wrong time.
Right.
And so being able to come back and find myself in the right place at the right time has been really really life-giving. It's also been an absolute surprise because I never, I've taught 3 seminary classes now. Like you said, I taught at LR, I taught undergrad classes at community college in Virginia. I taught undergrad classes here at Capital, but being able to teach at the seminary is just it's a huge gift, and it's an honor because I feel so blessed to be a part of the formation of the next generation of leaders, right? That's not something that most people get to be a part of. And so that was something that I wasn't sure was ever going to happen. And here we are. And I always feel like the dean's going to realize at some point, like, oh, we thought it was another guy. Like, we're going to have that one come back. Like, okay, that's fine. You caught me. Whatever.
Yeah. No, I get that. I mean, my exposure to Trinity was in 1999. They kicked off their summer seminary sampler program.
Yeah.
And I was the first group of that.
Really?
Yeah. And so Ruth Fortis was there at Trinity. She was heading the whole thing up. And we stayed in the basement of the Lohman complex, which was SS, they call it, because the Trinity housing was being renovated.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of fell in love with the city, fell in love with Capital, ended up coming back to Capital. And then after I graduated Cap, I was working like a bunch of, menial jobs like you do that first summer after college.
Right.
Ended up working at Cord Camera, which used to be a Columbus institution.
Right.
And I was shooting weddings and concerts and all that kind of stuff. And I filled out my Trinity paperwork. And my best friend, actually, the good Dr. Nate Jackson there at Capital, him and his wife at the time had just moved to Chicago to go to LSTC. And so I was in my car with my paperwork all filled out for Trinity, driving to Bexley. And I get a call from Nate, and he goes, why don't you come to Chicago? We can hang out for 4 more years. I don't think I ever even submitted an application to Trinity, So it's weird because for me, like, Trinity was such a big anchor to like my story. It's what got me from North Carolina to Ohio, like yada, yada, yada. And now here I am 2 miles away, right? Which is just, it's just really cool.
The world's small, man. Well, and it's funny, you brought up Summer Seminary Sampler. We call that Sustain the Flame now. We've united it with other parts of our programming that are all about faith formation in youth and young adults. And so because of COVID, one of the things we've done is we've actually transformed that to an online experience. So, and just for this year, the plan is to actually be back in person. Dear God, we hope next year. But so the week of June 8th through 13th, every day from 12 to 1, we're going to be releasing episodes that explore vocational exploration, that dive into the elements of our 40 faith program. So discovery, discernment, development, and decision making. And we have the good Dr. Nate Jackson as one of our guests on that. And we have people from across the church. So the ELCA program directors for youth ministry, for young adult ministry, campus ministry colleagues, like I said, faculty from Trinity, and then other experts from outdoor ministries, people who do this stuff with their lives. And that's part of the thing that I think is good about bringing in outside perspectives, right? I think that we have been able to see Sampler had this great legacy that was part of a Lilly Endowment grant that also started when I was at Duke. They'd already done it for years, but the Duke Youth Academy. And these programs have really been struggling. The Duke Youth Academy closed this year.
Really?
This was their last year, and they couldn't even do it on campus because of COVID. And so it's just been such a strange thing about how do we do this kind of work in ways that are financially sustainable and meeting the emerging needs of new populations. And so what we're finding this year is we're trying a new format, and it's gonna tell us some things. It's gonna tell us if people tune in or not. It's gonna tell us, what kind of staying power it has if they're asking questions in that kind of digital online format. So yeah, well, I'll be interested to see. But yeah, that's coming in the first full week of June. So yeah, I'll be sure to shoot you an email, and so on the day you can see Nate at least, and be like, hey, look, there's your guy.
Absolutely. So let's talk. It hit me yesterday that this coming Sunday is Pentecost.
Yeah.
And the last Sunday, a lot of congregations were meeting was Lent 3.
Yeah.
Right? So we lost Lent, we lost Holy Week, we lost Easter, we lost the season of Easter.
Right.
I did Ascension last Sunday just because I wanted to preach off of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I, I know what it was like on the ground and kind of the traditional congregational level.
Yeah.
Um, Walk me through, what did that look like from a university worship perspective, or what's the last 2 months been like for you?
Sure. Well, yeah, and I mean, there's the worship perspective, and then there's the community formation perspective.
Right.
So for worship, before we thought that we were going to be fully locked down, before the idea of a true stay-at-home order or a quarantine order was on our minds, when that Wednesday, it was a Tuesday night, that we just said no more class. And so Wednesday would have been Capitol Worship. And so we would have been in Kearns Chapel. We would have been having Chad Baker play the organ. And so that day, I just got online, did a reading, addressed the reality, called us into figuring out what is next and how we be faithful as people that are caring for others, even when we need care ourselves, and tried to manage that. Then we transitioned really quick. That Thursday night, we recorded Candlelight, our contemporary worship service on Thursday nights, at my house. And so we had, a few of us there, our worship intern, my wife, my grad assistant, myself, and one of my student workers were there, kind of just doing it and figuring out, all right, we can do this, and then we'll figure it out going forward. Then the idea was, okay, we're going to record all worship for the seminary and for the university in Shank Chapel, because it was smaller,
Yeah.
but it was dedicated space, wasn't going to be subject to any flooding, a lot of that kind of thing. And so we did that for a couple of weeks until campus closed. There was a time when we were still allowed to be on campus, and then when they closed campus, we had to go then to this in-home iteration. So what we have done is we have invited our musicians to play from their places, preacher to preach from their place, readers to read, prayers to pray, all of that kind of stuff. Use Zoom, and then use the function of Zoom to then cast it live to Facebook. And that's been working well enough for us, in terms of impressions. Impressions are this weird thing on social media, which basically means somebody saw it long enough to read it, but didn't necessarily stay engaged for any meaningful period of time.
Okay.
So, we got like thousands of impressions. That's not a real number. I mean, that's what we got, but it doesn't tell you any real engagement.
Right.
So we started looking at, all right, who are the people, or how many people stayed engaged for the longest measure of time that Facebook will give you, which is a minute, because Facebook effectively assumes that more than a minute of engagement, people are sticking around. And so we noticed actually an uptick in overall participation of people sticking around and staying engaged in our events that way, which was this huge surprise to me. I did not think that we would have that kind of increase in participation, but I wasn't thinking about people outside of Capitol. I was just thinking about our students. So overall, we lost, I'm certain, a part of our normal participant body, but we also reached a wider audience of our alumni, of our partner network, of people like, my parents, students' parents, when they knew they were preaching or singing or something like that.
Yeah.
So it was good. But then we have found that Zoom has its own problems, right? So we have, for instance, using music with Zoom is really hard because Zoom isolates your voice. And if you're trying to use a guitar or a piano or anything else, it will read that as background noise and push it to the back. So that's why if you see in the top left of your screen, this little thing that says turn on original sound, if you do that, it gets rid of the voice isolation. So you can actually use Zoom for musical performances. But I didn't know that at the time. And so I was like, why does this sound like garbage? Why can't we make this better? What's going on? So that's when I said, learning technology, I finally learned to use the technology that we have at least a little bit better. So that's what worship has looked like. But the content every week has been something around how do we react and how do we respond, and going from being reactive to proactive. The first few weeks was all reaction,
Right.
Oh, this is the new thing. This is what we're struggling with. This is how we thrive in hope, at least survive. And then we began looking to the summer, because we knew even if the world was back open by now, we wouldn't have had a graduation ceremony, and we wouldn't have had our normal send-off of our student groups, and we wouldn't have had the final classes and all of those rituals that end the year. So we've decided to continue worship through the summer every Wednesday night rather than end it, as a way to keep our community united together. And that's been good. So tonight, 8 o'clock, we'll have our next worship event, and that will have some conversation, and it's been good. It's been a different kind of engagement, but it's been a way to keep us united in purpose.
So if I know CAP alum or people who are just interested and excited about what you're doing, what's the best way for them to connect with that worship experience tonight?
Yeah, so if they just go to facebook.com/embrace at capital U, or facebook.com/ I believe it's Kearns RLC. Let me make sure. Kearns RLC. Yes, indeed, that is correct. Then they will be simulcast live there. And that's every time. And if you aren't a Facebook user and you're worried about that, you can actually watch live events on Facebook pages without having a Facebook account. That's something that people don't necessarily know. And so we found that out with some of our students who are either not Facebook users because of it's an old person's medium. I get that, right? I'm 35, so I must be dead, whatever. But then it's the other piece of people who are worried about the way that Facebook uses information, and that's totally valid. Yeah. But they also have Google accounts. And I'm like, if you have a Google account, it's the same thing with a different master. But whatever, that's fine. So anyway, if you go to the Embrace or Kearns page on Facebook, you can watch it live every Wednesday at 8.
Nice, thank you. To circle back around to a point you made, you know, I feel like it was about a week that everybody went from this may be not good to this is kind of bad in a big way. You know? So what unique opportunities for ministry did you find, especially at a college campus like Capital, where you have a residential component, international students who may not have a home to go back to during this whole process for getting from A to Z?
It's a hard question to answer because I feel like so much of that happened 17 years ago, and it's hard to remember that it was in fact only 2 months. Yeah. But so one of the unique ministry opportunities that it presented was empowering our students to be agents of compassion in the midst of the crisis. So for instance, we have had a couple of students connect with either First English or the church on Oakland Park, because a lot of their normal constituencies who were helping to serve either the fresh produce or the meals that those churches provide were 50, 60, 70, 80 years old. And so we're much more susceptible to COVID risk, right? Yep. And so we had some students that were really passionate about how do we respond. And so they got connected that way. We had some students, for instance, start a pen pal campaign, and they are still writing, like, honest to God, paper letters, handwriting to one another, offering support just beyond text, beyond social media in the midst of this process. So every few days I hear from students that they're getting letters from this person or that person, and not just people that were in our ministry either. And that's been the fun thing, is that I've heard both from our online worship opportunities, through our service opportunities, and through our kind of community development, community engagement opportunities that, oh, hey, Pastor Drew, I didn't always attend Candlelighter. I was never really a part of Embrace, but this has meant so much to me because it felt like I needed something to connect me, and this gave me a connection, right? So that was really the thing that spoke to me, was these are ways that people can stay connected. We had people write letters to inmates at Pickaway. We had do all sorts of different things. So that was a piece that was really important. The other side, though, was this really, one of the ideals or hopes of the Trinity Capital merger was that it would provide more opportunity for seminarians to be in ministry right away, and even sort of a step above the LIC site, right? Where in your LIC, often your first semester, or even your first year, you're kind of like observing and waiting and like maybe serving communion or reading. And like, I'm a staff of one, and so I don't got time for that. I'm like, listen, you're here, you're great. If you want to participate, you can do this thing right away. And so we've had seminarians who have been coordinating small groups. We've had seminarians who've been coordinating worship, who've been preaching, who have been leading worship. And that has been really, I think, another uniter of the Trinity and Capital communities, is that we have all gone through this together, and that at least in the ministry realm, we have all responded together. And that's been such an encouraging thing, because there's always, I went through the Lenore Ryan Southern Seminary merger when I was a student. So I know firsthand what it's like to feel like your school or your interests got forgotten or ignored or intentionally intentionally ostracized.
Yep.
And of course, as you know, all of those feelings were around people at Trinity and people at Capital. There were concerns, but the reality in the last 2.5 years that I've been here has been, we have grown together and we have developed where we're at now. And if COVID had hit the first summer or first spring I was here instead of this one, I think it would be a much more, I don't think it would be a good story to tell, right? I just don't think we were ready to heal, and heal is a strong word. I don't think we were ready to make that kind of progress yet, as a community, as a whole, Capital, Trinity, students, faculty, staff, alumni, everybody. So now, 2.5 years later, I think we have made that kind of progress where we've rallied and made significant inroads to supporting seminary students and undergraduate students, seminary faculty and undergraduate and graduate and law faculty, all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's been the fun thing to see and to be a part of.
Yes. Well, one of the things you just said that has kind of popped up a few times in our conversation is talking about people who aren't necessarily part of the CAP community or necessarily even in the room,
right?
Who are either brought in through letter writing or, viewing via Facebook and all that sort of thing, right? And so again, knowing that Pentecost is a few days away,
yeah,
I think that this, well, I said the other day to a friend that there's more online opportunities to connect or to find ways to plug in via churches and communities of faith in the last 2 months than there has been in the last 20 years.
Right.
This could be the most Pentecost-y Sunday since like the very first one.
Sure. Yeah. And I think it's super true. And I think it's one, if you are a pastor or a congregation member out there and you're thinking you can't wait until this whole thing is over so you can stop broadcasting your services online, trust me, you're doing it wrong. You need to keep doing this thing. You need to keep engaging online. Not only online, we are embodied people. The incarnation that Jesus took on our flesh matters.
Yep.
But if you ignore the digital ministry opportunity, you are ignoring an entire frontier that other people whose theology is, I would think, a whole lot more dangerous and destructive than ours, are not ignoring. And so either we're going to lease this space to someone who's going to be destructive rather than constructive, or we're going to make our own progress and be supportive and uplifting and formative for other people. So there's my soapbox on it, right? And I do think that you're right. This is a Pentecost kind of moment because, I mean, how many people are hearing of what you're doing in terms of online faith formation, in terms of podcasts, and being like, I don't understand that. I just, it's literally a language I don't get. But you and other people in your congregation are interpreters that are there to actually help other people access a message that's been around for literally thousands of years, but get it to them in a new way, deliver it to them in a new way. That's so exciting. And it's so good. And, I don't think anyone's accusing people who are doing online ministry of being drunk like they did back in the Acts story. Oh, well, he's online. It's only 9:00 in the morning. He must be drunk. But I do think people, I have heard, so I not just think, I know, there are assumptions or accusations of laziness or of, oh, this isn't real ministry, or of, oh, you're ignoring other responsibilities. And I don't think people who aren't doing the recording, the editing, the casting, the equipment formation, and all of the relationship formation it takes to get someone to this place.
Yeah.
They don't realize how much and how necessary right now it is to do that, to make it happen. And that's what I think is the kind of the Pentecost moment, is not just because it's a new thing, but because there's controversy around the new thing.
Yeah. As much as I love our little pie slice of Protestantism, the Lutherans are not the most nimble people. Organizationally, shocking, right? And so I think that's one of, me, I'm a chronic optimist, and I'm always looking for like, all right, well, what's the good thing? I'm like, well, this has really forced a lot of congregations to be outwardly focused, right? And that's who we're called to be. We are called to be missional people facing out into the world.
Right.
I remember on Easter, part of the sermon was about the whole idea of like, all right, cool, you show up looking for Jesus and he's not where you expect him. Great, come to the sanctuary. There's no one here.
Right.
So what do? We get to go out and, we get to find our Galilee. We get to figure out where we get to meet God in the world. And like, that's what we're called to do, like just as who we are. And another part of that is, there was that article in the Dispatch 2 weeks ago about how singing is a high risk activity, diaphragm deep breathing. Did you sit in on Bishop Dillahunt and had the little panel about singing and worship earlier last week?
I did not. No, I was actually recording a session for one of our Sustain the Flame things when that was happening. So no.
I mean, it was good. It was everything that you expect, right? Like if normal social distancing is 6 feet and someone is singing, it's now 18 feet.
Right.
So if you have a choir of 36 people, you need a football field for your choir to start with, like that kind of stuff. So talking to people at my congregation, one of the conversations we had with council was like, I understand we're all kind of itching to be in a room and to see one another. However, like, what are our expectations versus reality?
Right.
If you come into the room and when you measure social distancing and every other pew, we got 24 people who can't sing, can't touch, and the world looks at different, is that going to be more frustrating at this point than it would be to keep doing what we're doing and then as things unwind? Like let's have a smoother entry.
Right. What I can imagine is beginning to regather for Bible studies, beginning to regather, socially distant, you can gather in a sanctuary for a Bible study where you're not singing, where you're not, doing that kind of engagement, and have a real kind of relationship.
Yeah.
But it's going to be hard for people to come into a sanctuary, and unless there's some other kind of musical engagement or element, it's going to be hard for them to come and feel like they've really worshiped, right? And that's part of the difficulty is there is a feeling like you've worshiped, and then there's an actual definition or actual understanding of what worship truly is. Right. You don't need to sing to worship. You don't need to say X number of words to worship. There's all of that kind of reality. As Lutherans, we talk consistently about the proper ordo of gathering, word, sacrament, and sending. But even within that, there's a whole lot of flexibility. Yeah. When we had Kevin Strickland, when he was the executive for worship before he became bishop of the Southeastern Synod, he was on campus. And one of the things he really encouraged our team to do was look at those little red words in between paragraphs where it says, in these or similar words. Or similar is there very intentionally. And if those words don't fit, that's super okay. And so that was so freeing for some of us. For the more liturgically strict among us, that was not so encouraging. But for me, that was very freeing, and for some of our students. But there's also that a lot of those directions include may. You may sing a Kyrie. You may sing a hymn of the day. You may do these things. This is the appropriate place for it if you do so. But you don't have to do it. So that's the kind of thing that I think we need to, as those who are charged with the theological formation of our congregations, is to teach people and remind people these are things that we got used to doing because we loved them and they helped us in very particular ways. We don't have to do them, though. What we can do is instead find other ways to express ourselves. There are other art forms that can help us to express ourselves in worship. I'm even thinking about, we're going to have, in theory, our plan is to have people back on campus in the fall until the state tells us we can't, right? That is our hope. It's going to be different. It's going to be more distant. There's going to be more single rooms. There's going to be larger classrooms and smaller class sizes, all sorts of different things like that. But one of the things I've imagined is, how do you bring people together for worship and not have them singing? So fortunately, we have a conservatory with lots of good instrumentalists who can be very appropriately distanced and can still play their instrument as a way of a musical offering. I have even thought, and this is college students, so they may think it's funny, they may hate it, it may not work in Faith Whitehall or other congregations, but I think we might get branded kazoos and give one to everyone the first week. And so that way, you know, we're socially distant, there's no singing, they're just humming into their own little thing that they're going to take with them. But just to give this sense of, let's kind of laugh at the devil in the face, right?
Yeah.
Let's say, all right, we're not going to let you ruin everything for us. We're going to find ways to be healthy, to be smart, and also have fun in the midst of this whole thing. So that's the kind of thing that I think we're going to be looking toward, is just the opportunity for what can we do as worship needs to adjust, but then also what don't we have to do, and what new kinds of life can we live. That actually, I'm curious what you think. I know this is me turning the question on you, the interviewer, but here we are. I'm going to do it. So I'm curious what you or your congregation has thought of, because I'm sure your life has changed very differently in the last 2 months. And there's a lot of things that you can't do right now because of the quarantine, because of the stay-at-home orders, all that kind of stuff. Have you thought at all about what are the things that you're going to leave behind because you as in Faith Whitehall, not just you as in pastor, you've realized those aren't necessary. Those aren't things that we need to keep doing just to stay busy. That in fact, there is much more necessary and important work to be done, including finding time for rest and finding time for life together. So what are the things that you're looking at in changing life as you get in your transition period?
I mean, so there's two answers to that, right? There's on the servant evangelism kind of side of things, and then there's the liturgical side of things, right? And the people of faith are and have always been just really excited to engage with especially food drives and food pantries and all that sort of thing,
Sure.
which again, in the modern era, you know, LSS down on Champion, they went from X number of volunteers per shift to 1, you know, and that sort of thing. So I was looking and trying to figure out ways to tap into the things that we love to do to give people positive physical experience. And so for the past 2 Sundays and next Sunday, we are having a drive-through touchless canned food drive for LSS.
Right.
Because that way I'm touching the people who love to give. I'm giving them the opportunity to drive through the parking lot, but we also don't need the hour-and-a-half meeting that would typically be the gateway to get us to the food drive. All right, let me just make the decision. Let me pull the trigger. Let's do the thing we want to do. And again, like forcing ourselves to be a little more nimble and say, okay, I guess this is what we're doing. Perfect, you know. It's been really good to see our council, as pretty much every council in America has. We've, as I mentioned before we started recording, we had a bunch of flooding in our basement because of floods in Whitehall earlier last week. Our council meetings, we've had 2 or 3 in the last 10 days that started off being, okay, what do we do about worship in the future? And then quickly transitioned into, all right, what's happening with the flooding, right? And so suddenly we've kind of, you know, we've shaken off the shackles of wait, where is our very detailed agenda?
Right.
Where are all of those building blocks of meeting protocol that we've always done? You know, and so like, I don't know, I'm thinking about the answer to that part of your question in terms of all the things that we've let go to be more nimble, to get back to the root of the church, or back to the root of the work of the church.
Sure.
And so that's been just really, really positive on so many levels. And, you know, and that balances out the same longing for interpersonal communication that we all have.
Right.
You know?
For sure.
I'd say on a worship level, I got an idea from a friend of mine, and so what I'm currently in the process of is writing a worship companion,
Hmm.
which if worship happens, if in-person live worship happens, knowing that we can't sing and do X, Y, Z, I got to rewrite the worship
Right.
order anyway,
Right.
you know?
Oh yeah.
Um, and so the way I think is I always consider what are all my parameters, what are all the things I can't do, and then that will kind of disclose what I can do
Yeah. 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 It makes
when
sense.
you put everything together. So I'm like, all right, I can't sing. I need something that I can mail people who are shut-ins and don't have computers.
Mm.
I need something that's easy enough to follow along. That if when we and where our goal is to start the first Sunday of June doing Zoom for that worship hour experience.
Hmm.
That's easy enough that 80 people can get on Zoom and follow it along
Right.
and not be confused or frustrated, right?
Right.
So then suddenly, like I'm kicking the Kyrie, like sorry Kyrie, like hey, we're not playing and singing with 80 people. We're
No.
just not doing it, you know. And then the parts of it that really break my heart are I've been thinking for 3 days whether or not to do the Apostles' Creed because there's part of
Mm.
me, the Lutheran in me, that I'm like, no, this is what we do.
Right.
But can you imagine 85 people trying to say the Apostles' Creed a half a second apart on Zoom?
Oh yeah. I mean it's it is unfortunately just not going to work, right? That any kind of unison response beyond a simple amen, right? A one word is just so delayed on Zoom that frustration element that you spoke of is right. Now, the flip side of that is what we have done is we've just encouraged everyone to mute themselves, and so you don't hear the kind of response. And so if you like, we're going to say the creed, and then we'll have Susan, who is our worship assistant, and she is going to say the creed, and we're following Susan in her speech, then that can work.
Okay.
But trying to have everyone live audio at the same time say it, it's like you said, just same thing with the Kyrie, same thing with singing anything. The delay is just so strong, and that again, that voice isolation, trying to pick out the dominant voice, it's going to be such a distraction that it's not optimized. Zoom is not optimized for that kind of thing.
No.
And I think that's what we're realizing too, is even as we get good with our resources, we also find the limits of our resources. You can say, like, there's no way to make Zoom what it's not.
Right.
Zoom is not a congregational worship resource. We have made it as much as it can be, but it's not actually meant for that thing.
Yeah. No, it's very true. It's very true. And what was it? Yeah, it was the week of Lent 3, which typically you're halfway through Lent anyway. We're all kind of losing our minds, being
Yeah.
on our side of what's happening, and then suddenly it's like, all right, cool. Let me download Final Cut Pro and figure out how to soundproof my guest room, which I still haven't done a good job of, and
Right.
do all that sort of thing. And so I think that, I mean, the question that you turned on me is such a powerful question for people who are in places of congregational leadership,
Mm-hmm.
which is like, what are we letting go?
Yeah.
I mean, because I mean, one of my questions for you is, I mean, since it's all kicked off, and you've spoken to this a little bit, but like, what does your workflow look like in the terms of a standard week? I mean, you've already touched on a lot of production value, a lot of volunteer coordinating, but
Right.
what's your week look like?
So it typically looks like right now a lot of recording, because in addition to our weekly Wednesday night worship, we are recording the Sustain the Flame piece. And so that's taking hours of recording every day. I'm helping our Residence Life with a social media blitz they're doing, and they're featuring different offices every day. And so they're featuring my office on Sunday. So I've got to get them content by Thursday every week. And so there's lots of those recording pieces. Some of it is looking like getting back to things that are a part of my call, but that really got shelved in the busyness of life. And so back to doing a lot more writing. I've been writing for our newsletters. I've been writing for some publications. I've got published online in a couple of different places lately, and which has been great. I've been writing some grant proposals for things. And so some of that's for additional student work dollars to help students be employed as we go forward, because if y'all haven't heard yet, the reality for colleges and universities in light of COVID-19 is going to be significant budget cuts for everybody. And we are fortunately not the University of Akron, who, for instance, is cutting like 60 million of a $325 million budget, which is, do that math, and it's just the percentages are frightening. But we're having to cut, and that's a thing. And so I'm trying to figure out what are ways we can still help students be employed and not have them feel the cuts, right? Like, we're going to feel the cuts elsewhere. That's just the reality of things. But so doing grant applications to make sure that happens. One of the things I'm really excited about that has just started is we applied for a grant and got accepted to start our own podcast on campus. And so starting this fall, we're going to have a podcast that is specifically focused in vocational exploration. So helping people figure out what is it that God is up to in their lives? How do they discover their opportunities? How do they discern what's valuable to them? How do they develop their skills? And how do they make decisions without either feeling like they've trapped themselves into this tiny little narrow box forever and ever, amen, or refusing to make a decision at all, right? Being in that perpetual place of like, where should we eat for dinner tonight? And nobody answers because nobody's capable of just saying, I hate Burger King. We're never going to Burger King.
Yeah.
And that's a true thing. Burger King is disgusting. I'm sorry. So anyway, so we've begun pre-production on that. So beginning to write some draft, work on who are we going to invite, including alum and friends of the university, faculty and staff, all that kind of stuff. And then there's the whole level of, I'm still meeting regularly with students. I'm a part of some ELCA teams as well. And so I'm on the advisory board, I guess is our technical term, for the core youth leadership team who runs national youth ministry stuff that's not the National Youth Gathering. They're contributors to it, but the youth gathering has its own office of staff to do that thing. Okay. So we have meetings frequently. And then I am the worship advisor for the Lutheran Student Movement national body. And so we have meetings on the regular. And so there's a lot of that where it's just, we would have been meeting in person, but we're meeting online now.
Yeah.
And then we're in the planning mode. And so I'm trying to figure out, all right, how do we do this for the fall? I'm teaching 2 classes in the fall, so I'm going to have to prepare them to be in person and online, doing all of that, planning worship in person and online for the fall, all of those pieces. And it's going to be a juggling act for a long time until we have some kind of, this is what we're going to do for a semester. And that's our commitment. And then we'll be able to know more concretely. But until then, it's just building basic formats and then being able to choose one when the time comes that we're either forced to choose or the choice is made for us.
Yeah, but staring into that ambiguity, like the ambiguity of the fall.
Yeah.
Would you say that to take the temperature on campus, I mean, it's optimistically ambiguous?
Man, that really depends on who you're talking to. I would say I am optimistically ambiguous, at least in terms of the reality is every signal I'm given is, if it's at all possible for us to be in person, we're going to be in person, but we're going to be in person in intelligent, safe, and informed ways. We're going to be requiring masks, right? Like that this is something that is a part of our lives until there's a vaccine, that there's going to be social distance mandates, that for instance, we have explored, if we can house people on campus, how many can we house in a safe way? And so that means that will have a very significant impact. If you can't have, we couldn't have people living in quads, I'm guessing, right? I'm not a residence life director, but how do you stay socially distant when you're in a 300 square foot space with 3 other people who are all trying to use the same door and desks that are never 6 feet apart from one another, right? It just doesn't work. And so people who are smarter than I am with those things are working on those details. But I don't think, and this is me, as Paul once said, this is not a word from the Lord, this is just a word from me. I don't think college is going to be the same ever again. And I don't think college is going to feel anything like it used to until at least next fall. I think the spring will be better than this fall. I think spring 21 will be better than fall 20 in terms of feeling like a more normal experience for everyone. But it's not going to be, we won't establish a new normal until fall of 21. That will be the first year where we have a real shot at, hopefully with a vaccine, hopefully with a developed immunity of some kind, how can we then return to an intelligent, informed way of being with one another? But we'll see, right? I mean, I could be off and we could be there this fall. That would be a huge surprise to me, but I'm not a scientist either. As much as I play one on TV, I'm not. So it's not a thing.
I think one of the things that makes it really challenging from a social perspective, social cultural perspective, is getting to the point of feeling safe as an individual. That is an individual like place where every person has to get themselves. Like we all have to cross that bridge eventually.
Right.
And there's no one thing that's going to make our entire country or our entire world feel secure overnight. So, how do we live in a tight-knit community, whether that's a metropolitan area, whether that's a college campus, with people who are on both sides of that bridge without,
Right.
belittling or antagonizing one
another? Yeah. That's a fantastic question. And I unfortunately have no real answer. Getting people to that like safe, how do you make a group of people who've been raised on both the kind of American individualism and who have been raised in the kind of postmodern, largely Western sense of individuality? How do you make us all feel safe at the same time? You don't.
Yeah.
What I think is going, and again, this is something that is a possibility. It's not a certainty by any means, but I think, for instance, accreditation is going to change for colleges and universities across the board, because it used to be, if you were accredited to teach in-person classes, you were not accredited to teach online classes. Those are two different processes, right?
Oh, wow.
Like you had to show that you could do well teaching online. You couldn't just say like, oh, well, I've taught philosophy or math or econ for 17 years, and sure, I can do it online. You had to have the right training and you had to have the right evidence that it was an appropriate class to be giving someone credit for and charging someone tuition for. When this happened, basically every accrediting body suspended, not deleted entirely, but suspended those requirements and said, to teach out, you can do whatever you need to do within the realm of reason to be sure that your students are taught the information that they need to finish their classes. My guess is, because of that individualism that you're noting, that lack of safety that certain people will feel, and that demand for in-class options that other people will feel, is that this will change the landscape of the university, not just Capital University, but the American university, to a place where every class offered by a traditional on-campus program is also accessible online. And if you want to take online classes at Capital University or Wittenberg or Case Western, or pick your school, wherever it's at, you can do that now because it's a different model. And all of those schools are not going to want to lose their students to SNHU or the University of Phoenix or all of those other places that have been doing online forever.
Yep.
But we think, and I think this too, that our model of both teaching and formation is different, and different enough that it should survive and thrive in this new era. So I think that not by this fall, but soon, in the next couple of years, we will see that change, where undergraduate liberal arts universities across the board have every single class available as an online opportunity. Now, again, that's not a word from the Lord. That's just an assumption that I'm making. But I think it's likely. I think to survive, something like that has to happen. Or else, why wouldn't you just do everything online from one of those schools where it doesn't matter if you're ever there in person or not?
Right. Yeah, I mean, because if I'm paying tuition to, take gen eds eating Fruit Loops in my underwear, why am I going to pay more to not eat Fruit Loops?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
I think you're 100% right. It's the formation that happens in the community. It's the formation that happens in the style of life and learning that's possible. And I think that conversation parallels the worship reality of so many congregations.
Yeah,
there are some people who are like, hey, if I can engage or watch worship in my pajamas, I'm just going to do that. But then there are other people who realize that in the in-person event, there's a reality that happens there that cannot be replicated.
Right. Absolutely. And that's the thing, that it's just such a hard a hard cost benefit ratio, right? How do you run those numbers? How do you manage that relationship? Because back to what we said earlier, it's not like power washing a driveway. It's not like building a fence. At some point, you can't just measure in an easy, discernible kind of way, how do we quantify the value here? And that's what we're all trying to figure out, is how do we quantify what we're up to in ways that aren't just about proving that we're worth whatever our tuition is, but actually showing that we are a part of God's ongoing work here in the world.
Well, my friend, thank you so much for your time today. It's always good to talk to you, the good Reverend Drew Tucker, campus pastor at Capital University. Please let me know if there's anything I or the people of faith can do to be supportive to you, Trinity Capital, or any of the ministries you're involved in. And again, I know, we were trying to do this last week, and I know last week got really crazy for you really fast.
Yeah.
So again, thank you so much for your time, and man, enjoy your summer. And, remember, as we all have to let go of some things and take time for you, man.
100%. I will do that. Thank you for the invites, and I will continue to keep you and the people of faith in my prayers. And, once this whole thing ceases and we're back to some kind of in-person life, I'd love to come out and worship with y'all at some point. So
absolutely. We look forward to that.
All right. Take care, man.
Later, bud.